On behalf of the Office on Violence Against Women, which is also referred to as OVW, welcome to the Pre-Application Information Session webinar for the Restorative Practices Pilot Site Program, which I'll refer to as the RP program for short. The purpose of this session is to provide information regarding the RP program and Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO for short. We will highlight a few key points in this presentation. However, it is not the intent, nor is there sufficient time to go over every aspect of the NOFO or the program. Applicants are responsible for reading the Fiscal Year 2025 Restorative Practices Funding Opportunity in its entirety and the OVW Application Companion Guide to ensure that a complete application is submitted. Restorative Practices staff cannot provide any feedback to applicants about the quality of an applicant's proposal or provide any information outside of what is presented in the NOFO. However, we will be able, throughout the period that the funding opportunity is open, to respond to any questions about the application requirements. Please feel free to send questions to ovw.restorativejustice@usdoj.gov or call our main line at 202-307-6026. Please note this presentation will be posted on the OVW website and will contain the reference contact information. We have a lot of information to cover, and I will start with sharing information on the RP program. Next, we'll talk about key award information, following with the requirements around eligibility, partnerships, and the program. We will cover application components and then go over information from our grants and financial management division about budgets. The webinar will finish by reminding everyone about registering and updating their sam.gov and Just Grants accounts, as there is a two-step process to applying for this funding. Lastly, I will cover the application submission and resources and what may be expected after applications are submitted and reviewed, including calls or meeting with our technical assistance providers. So first, the Restorative Practices Pilot Site Program. The RP program is authorized by U.S. Code 34, Section 12514, and through this program, OVW seeks to support, strengthen, enhance, and expand existing restorative practice programs that prevent or address domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking in accordance with the restorative practices definition at the statute. This means that OVW is specifically interested in supporting communities that are already offering restorative practices and those who are interested in building evidence for victim-centered, trauma-informed, and culture-responsive restorative practices addressing these harms. As such, the purpose of RP is to implement a program for restorative practices focused in preventing or addressing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking in collaboration with designated technical assistance and training providers. As mentioned, with heavy emphasis, OVW is interested in supporting communities to enhance or expand their current efforts at the intersection of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and restorative practices. OVW will award 48-month cooperative agreements to establish projects that form a partnership of two or more entities that have a demonstrated history of comprehensive training and experience working with victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, and a demonstrated experience in implementing restorative practices. OVW seeks to support and fund a range of pilot sites, including sites in various geographic locations with differing demographic characteristics, focused on different culturally specific and underserved populations, addressing different Violence Against Women Act subject areas, domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking, and projects that may have a connection to the criminal justice system as long as the program is not housed within or administered by a court, prosecutor's office, law enforcement agency, or any other component of the civil or criminal justice system. Recipients under this program will receive training and technical assistance for the duration of their awards that is tailored to the recipient's distinct approach to restorative practices of the four crimes. Please note that throughout the funding opportunity in this presentation, you may notice that we reference people harmed, people who cause harm, harm doers, victims, survivors, and offenders, and you may wonder why the terms are not consistently used. The reason for that is because we want to use terminology used by practitioners in the statutory language that authorizes this program. In the next slide, we will cover award information, period, amount, type of application, and type of awards. All successful applicants for the RP program will implement a 4-year or 48-month award period. OVW estimates it will make around 20 cooperative agreement awards for up to $1 million each per award. As such, OVW has the discretion to make awards for greater or lesser amounts than requested and to negotiate the scope of work and budget with applicants before making an award or after an award is made, but prior to accessing funds. It's important to emphasize the type of award will be cooperative agreements and not grants. With cooperative agreements, OVW and technical assistance providers are more involved in shaping the project with cooperative agreement awards and recipients working closely with us. This also means that OVW must approve activities before recipients are able to do them, which will be captured in your terms and conditions of the award. Now let's talk about eligibility and see if you are eligible to apply, or if you're not eligible, how you may be able to partner with an eligible entity, as we will also discuss required partnerships. There are 6 categories of eligible applicants, including units of local government, tribal governments, tribal organizations, victim service provider, institutions of higher education, and public or private nonprofit organizations, including tribal nonprofit organizations and faith-based. For more information, please see the eligibility information section of this NOFO. Having a required partnership for this program means that an applicant cannot be doing this work alone, even if the applicant has experience in both direct services and advocacy and restorative practices. Applicants must identify its primary expertise and have a partner to address the other category. For example, if an applicant identifies that their organization has direct victim services and advocacy expertise in working with people harmed by domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking, it must partner with another organization that has the expertise in implementing restorative practices. Similarly, if the applicant identifies that their organization has the restorative practice expertise, that applicant must partner with a victim service provider that has the expertise providing direct victim services and advocacy to people harmed by domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and/or stalking. Each application must include formal partnerships as evidenced in a signed Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. Later in this presentation, we will talk about an exception which is limited to tribal governments, where tribal governments may elect to submit letters of commitment from each external partner rather than an MOU at the time of application, but will need to submit an MOU within 6 months of an award. In the MOU, the 5 elements that must be demonstrated: experience implementing restorative practices, history of collaborating with community-led or community-driven efforts to address domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, a history of advocating for survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking, experience in screening the suitability of individuals who caused harm, and experience in working with individuals who caused harm. Now we'll talk about program requirements. Applicants receiving funding under this program will be required to engage in the following activities. You'll be required to engage in a planning period to work with OVW and technical assistance and training providers. Prior to implementing restorative practices, you'll be required to engage in a planning period to assess current organizational structure, capacity, and practices, determine which restorative practices that you want to enhance, identify additional training and technical assistance that you may need, and hire or designate a full-time site coordinator. It is anticipated that the planning period will be for 12 months, but the time frame may vary by site and will depend on the site's ability to meet the project activities determined by OVW. During the planning period, pilot sites will have access to limited funding until all the planning activities have been completed and OVW approves required deliverables. At that time, pilot sites will then be able to access remaining funds for their implementation period. Upon successful completion and approval, applicants or grantees will implement the provision of restorative practices only within the definition of restorative practices outlined in the authorizing statute. Additionally, applicants receiving funding under this program will be required to ensure that any restorative practices funded under this grant program includes individuals with knowledge and experience in conducting risk assessments and referring victims to additional services and resources, and with respect to the evidence-based risk assessment, if the applicant or subrecipient determines that a victim or dependent of a victim is at significant risk or subsequent injury, sexual assault, or death, the applicant or subrecipient shall refer the victim or dependent to other victim services instead of restorative practices. Also, designate a full-time site coordinator to oversee and implement project activities. Participate in at least one all-site meeting per year with 5 to 7 people from each site with dates and locations to be determined. Participate in OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance throughout the duration of the project period. In addition to participating in a new grantee orientation, you'll work with OVW and TTA providers to identify additional training, participate in customized training and technical assistance, identify community resources, and include community-based organizations that you can partner with to enhance your partnerships and collaborations. And lastly, collect and report on performance indicators in which OVW will provide forums, instructions, and training and related tools for performance reporting. Throughout this next section, we will go over the required application components, including the proposal abstract, narrative, job descriptions, budget, memorandum of understanding or letters of commitment, and certification letter to implement statutorily defined restorative practices. We will also touch on the summary data sheet. While we are going through each of these items, this slide includes point values for the proposal narrative, which has a total of 70 points, in which the purpose will be scored up to 20 points. What will be done section will be scored up to 25 points, and the who will implement section will be scored up to 25 points. The budget, detailed worksheet, and narrative will be scored up to 10 points, and the MOU/LOC will be scored up to 20 points. Please note the OVW will not be making any award selections solely based on scores. OVW seeks to fund a range of pilot sites, including sites in various locations with different demographic characteristics, culture-specific and or underserved populations, and different valid subject areas to be addressed. OVW is interested in supporting projects that implement a diverse range of restorative practices, including projects that may have a connection to the criminal justice system as long as they are not housed within them. The summary data sheet provides a brief snapshot of your project and is used in the initial review of your application. While not scored and doesn't count towards the 20-page limit, it is important to capture key information about your agency and the proposed project in the summary data sheet. The proposal narrative has 3 significant areas, including the purpose of the proposal, what will be done, and who will implement. The purpose of the proposal highlights the needs of your community using data and educates peer reviewers about your community and target population. The what will be done section explains the activities proposed to address the needs identified in the purpose section. And the who will implement section describes the professional qualifications and demonstrates capacity of the lead applicant and partners who are responsible for implementing the project. Be sure to include a header and respond to each of the questions when asked in the NOFO, and note that the proposal narrative section is limited to 20 pages. For the purpose of the proposal, describe the need of the project and help reviewers understand your specific community needs by answering each of the questions identified in the NOFO for this section. In short, the information you include here tells reviewers about the dynamics of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, including any unique cultural context within the community to be served by the project. It includes challenges of implementing existing restorative practices, how the proposed project will enhance your existing or expand its restorative practices that address these 4 crimes. This section is also where you have an opportunity to describe the available resources within the community, referral processes, and include situations where restorative practices are not a suitable option. The What Will Be Done section is where you explain what you will do with grant funds. Be sure to provide detailed information that clearly describes the activities and strategies to support your proposed project. Information provided in this section should be clear and thorough so that reviewers understand how the project will fully address the components listed. In this section, describe how the experience and needs of the people harmed will be centered in the program design, as well as how the needs of the people harmed will be balanced by working on accountability with the people who have caused the harm. Also describe evidence-based risk assessment tools, processes that will be used, and explain the screening practices and procedures for determining the suitability of any individual who committed a harm to participate in restorative practices. Also describe how the restorative practices model will be used to meet the needs of the target population, and please ensure you describe how the proposed project will improve accessibility for people with disabilities and people who are deaf or hard of hearing, and people with limited English proficiency. In the Who Will Implement section, identify the key individuals and partners involved in the proposed project and demonstrate that they can address the stated need and successfully implement the proposed project and activities throughout the 48-month project period. Providing details on their expertise and experience is critical here. Additionally, this section is where you demonstrate that either you or your partners have a comprehensive training as well as experience working with victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Similarly, explain the history of the applicant or partners for implementing restorative practices, including the number of years of experience in restorative practices, a list of the types of crimes or incidents addressed, and the population served, and how trust has been built within the community, including people who have been harmed, people who caused harm, and how perceptions of partiality have been addressed. Related to the Who Will Implement section of the proposal narrative, in demonstrating that the people and organizations identified have the capacity and commitment to address the stated need and can successfully implement the proposed project activities throughout the project period, job descriptions of all key personnel must be attached, and this will not count towards the page limit. Applicants are required to submit a detailed budget covering the 48-month of the award period. Be sure to incorporate the cost for activities described in the proposal narrative. Be sure to include detailed calculations illustrating how costs were determined. And please remember to include funds to support or describe in-kind resources for victims who are disabled, deaf, or hard of hearing, and for victims with limited English proficiency. Also, you must include costs for the full-time site coordinator. You must also include costs to attend the OVW mandatory sponsored training and technical assistance in the amount of $50,000 or $60,000 for Alaska, Hawaii, and U.S. territories. You must also include a $300,000 planning period budget for year one. And remember to attach the budget worksheet and narrative in Just Grants. Applicants are required to submit the Memorandum of Understanding, which is a document containing the terms of the partnership and the allocation of roles and responsibilities between two or more parties, and it must be included as an attachment to the application in Just Grants. The MOU must be a single document and must be signed and dated by the authorized representative of each proposed partner organization during the development of the application. OVW will accept electronic signatures. Tribal governments only who are unable to submit a signed MOU may submit a signed letter of commitment from each project partner. If selected for funding, the tribal government must then submit a signed MOU as a deliverable within 6 months of the award. All applicants must upload and attach the required certification to implement statutorily defined restorative practices, signed by the highest authorizing official of the organization on the organization's letterhead, and upload it in Just Grants. At a minimum, the applicant that doesn't include the required certification letter must be required to, at the time of application, must be required to submit the letter prior to receiving the award. OVW does not fund activities that jeopardize victim safety, deter or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims, or allow offenders to avoid responsibility for their actions. Applications that propose any such activities may receive a deduction in points during the application review process or may be eliminated from consideration. OVW may support survivor-centered alternative pathways to justice and non-criminal approaches to accountability that fall within the statutory scope of this program and do not compromise victim safety. You will find more information on this topic in the OVW Application Companion Guide. The activities listed on pages 13 to 14 of the NOFO as the out-of-scope activities will not be funded under this program. Out-of-scope activities also include restorative practices that do not meet the definition outlined at 34 U.S. Code. Please also see the full list of unallowable activities in the funding restrictions section of the NOFO. The next few slides are provided by our Grants and Financial Management Division, also known as GFMD, in OVW, which provides additional information on the NOFO financial requirements. We are going to focus on aspects of your application that relate to documents that our financial team, the GFMD, reviews. More specifically, we'll discuss some items that GFMD has identified from prior year applications that could help with expediting our review process. We're going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you with a link to a detailed webinar on how to develop the budget that will be included in your application. First, we'll highlight the terms of the identified summary data sheet, which is completed by all applicants. Secondly, two items that we'd like to discuss are the single audit response and the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure. OVW requests that all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funds during their last fiscal year. If they have, then they indicate that and also specify the end date of their last fiscal year. However, GFMD is finding that applicants do not always include all this information. Please ensure this question is answered in its entirety on the summary data sheet. Another item that we'd like to highlight from the NOFO is specifically for nonprofit organizations. If you use the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure to determine your executive compensation, you are required to provide a disclosure letter. Please refer to the NOFO for further details and a link to a sample letter. Note there are 4 required parts to the disclosure letter. The sample letter outlines all 4 parts of the disclosure, so please be sure to follow the sample and provide a response to each of the 4 pieces. The next item I'd like to discuss is the pre-award risk assessment questions, which assist GFMD during the pre-award risk assessment review for all applications. Each applicant must prepare a response to all 11 questions, and each question has multiple parts. We've noticed in prior years that applicants don't always fully answer all parts of the question, which in turn requires GFMD to reach out to the applicant and may delay funding decisions. Some of the most common issues that we've encountered have been, for example, question number 2, where the applicant indicates that they do indeed have internal policies, but then they don't provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures. On question 3, some applicants fail to provide a summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it tracks budgeted versus actual expenditures. These are just a few examples, but in general, please make sure you read each piece of each question and provide a full and comprehensive response. The next slide quickly highlights some resources that are available as you're creating the budget to be submitted with your application. Over the last couple of years, GFMD has developed a detailed webinar presentation on how to develop a budget to be submitted. This presentation addresses some of the challenges you may face with your budget and provides some insights onto OVW's budget review process. The webinar can be found on the link at this slide on OVW's website. Next up is the uniform guidance, which can be found at 2 CFR 200, using your favorite search engine for this one. Other resources include the DOJ Financial Guide and the NOFO itself. We know this can be a lot of information to process, so if you have any questions about the GFMD information just discussed, please feel free to contact the GFMD Help Desk at the listed email or phone number. Next, we'll go over how to apply. I want to stress the importance of registering and/or updating your SAM, System for Award Management, or SAM.gov, grants.gov, and Just Grant accounts. To apply for this funding, an applicant must have a registered and updated account with each of these systems. If you have applied previously, please go and ensure that your accounts are updated and active. SAM.gov registration requires an average of 2 to 3 weeks to update, and grants.gov registration takes about an average of 1 week. We strongly encourage you to register or update your account by September 30th, but you certainly could start sooner. You can find this opportunity in grants.gov by using the assistance listing number 16.052, grants.gov opportunity, or the title of this NOFO. In case you're wondering why you need to register and ensure your accounts are updated for SAM.gov, grants.gov, and Just Grants, it's because this is a two-step submission process. A complete application has components of the application that will be submitted in both grants.gov and Just Grants. Please mark your calendars for these critical dates. There are two deadlines. The grants.gov deadline is Tuesday, October 4th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern, where you must submit two forms, the SF-424, the Application for Federal Assistance Standard Form, and the SF-LLL, or the Disclosure of Lobbying Activities Form. If you don't submit these documents in grants.gov, then you will not be able to submit the rest of your application in Just Grants. It is important to submit the grants.gov documents sooner than later. Then the Just Grants deadline is Thursday, October 6th at 8:59 p.m. Eastern, which is where you will submit your full application. Please note, applications must adhere to the following formatting technical requirements. These are listed in the NOFO, including sections headers will also help application reviewers to read, follow, and score your applications. Now let's talk about applying through grants.gov. Applicants must complete the Application for Federal Assistance, SF-424, and the Disclosure of Lobbying Activities, SFLLL, in grants.gov, as mentioned before. As a reminder, if you don't submit these documents by the deadline, you will not be able to submit your remaining components of the application in Just Grants. This deadline will not be extended, so make sure you submit these these initial documents, as soon as you can. It's a critical step to completing your application submission. After you submit these two forms, the applicant will receive an email notification to complete the rest of the application in Just Grants. If the applicant's a new user in Just Grants, the email will include instructions on registering with Just Grants. Okay, so after you submit those two forms in grants.gov and you're registered there, you will then submit the full application in Just Grants. The proposal abstract is entered in a text box. The pre-award or risk assessment is an online survey, and the summary data sheet is uploaded as an attachment. The proposal narrative, job descriptions, budget, and MOU/letter of commitment and certification letter are then uploaded in Just Grants as attachments. Please read the NOFO carefully for all documentation requirements. As we want to maximize this webinar, rather than going through each of the steps of applying to Just Grants in more detail, I want to provide you information for you to access self-guided training resources, including a training and virtual Q&A session on application submission, available through the link on this slide. Now, here are some final tips for application submission and resources. Please start early. Read the Notice of Funding Opportunity carefully, early, and often. Some steps, such as registering with the SAM or grants.gov, take several days to complete, so please start these as soon as possible, as you cannot apply without them, even if you have your application ready. We recommend that applicants begin processes as soon as possible, but no later than the date suggested. However, nothing prevents them from starting earlier. Review the application checklists in the NOFO and make sure that your application is complete. One more time, as a reminder of the deadlines, the grants.gov deadline is 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, October 14th. Full applications are due in Just Grants no later than 8:59 p.m. Eastern on Thursday, October 16th. Lastly, what happens after the application is submitted and reviewed? We would like you to know that you can expect in the fall that TA providers may contact applicants to discuss their applications and proposed projects before we make funding decisions and recommendations. If you have questions that come up as you're working on and submitting your application, here's contact information for each group that can help with your application questions. Thank you for joining today's pre-application webinar. As a reminder, this webinar will be posted to OVW's website. Good luck on your applications and feel free to reach out to us with any questions that may come up for you.